There's different approaches to reading, and as you mentioned, it's like under the umbrella of the structured literacy approach, which is very systematic, very explicit, and it teaches all of the research-based components of literacy.
Welcome to the BJU Press Teacher Edition podcast, where Christian educators are encouraged and inspired as we bring you interviews, practical ideas, strategies, and answer your questions about teaching in today's culture. And here's your host, Jenny Copeland.
Have you ever been trying to help a student and you just feel like your collection of tools and tricks are just running out? You feel like you just need something else to get through to the student. I think we've all been there at one point or another, and maybe you are currently sitting with your head on your desk, racking your brain for another way to reach out and break through to a child to just help them understand and to learn. Well, today we're going to talk about some tools that might just be what you need to help you or to help a struggling colleague. And by the way, welcome to you, all of our listeners. We're glad you're back with the Teacher Edition podcast. If you've not visited our website, I want to invite you to go do that, teachereditionpodcast.com. There you're going to find information about this podcast and, of course, about the individual episodes. You can also listen to the podcast there. You can also leave us your stories and your questions. We will play both questions and stories here on the podcast as they come in. Don't forget, if you'd like to share a shout out to an individual or maybe individuals who inspired you to become a teacher or an administrator, we would love to get that and play those here on the show. For those of you on social media, just a reminder, you can find us on Facebook as Teacher Edition Podcast. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok as Teacher Edition Pod. For those who are listening, don't forget, you can hop on over and watch this episode on YouTube at Teacher Edition Podcast. By the way, please do take time to follow, like, and comment, and also share this podcast. Let's reach out to as many Christian school educators as possible and share the word about this free resource. Okay, let's get into today's topic. I'm so excited to have Dr. Christina Franco joining us. Christina has a heart for helping students of all abilities to learn, and specifically to learn to read. She's currently a teacher at an amazing school that specializes in supporting students with dyslexia. She also leads the Multisensory Classroom, an online platform where she shares the structured literacy content that she's created for small group and classroom instructions. I will just say, I know firsthand her materials are amazing. They are research-based literacy materials that really address diverse needs of our students. Christina also provides educators with practical guidance on implementing the Orton-Gillingham approach, which is a structured literacy method really across all different teaching contexts. It has a wide application. So I first met Christina when we served together at a school. She was our reading resource teacher, and I'm here to tell you, she poured into those students, literally running down every possible way to help support those struggling readers. She really did incredible work there with those students. By the way, Christina also loves spending time with her husband and her two children. They love being outdoors. They are runners. They like cycling and all those fun things that they get to do together. So Christina, thank you for taking time. It's a privilege to have you here today. And I have a feeling we have a lot to cover today. So welcome.
I agree. And thank you so much. It's so good to see you again.
Okay, so I told our audience a little bit about you. I mentioned the Orton-Gillingham method. So that has been a significant part of your work as you support young readers. You've invested much, not only into that teaching approach, but specifically into marrying it in with reading materials that are already used by a school, a lot of different methods there. So I want to talk more about that specifically in a moment. But first, just let's back up. I'd love for you to tell us what led you into Orton-Gillingham.
That's a great question. It's a journey that I've been on for a long time, and I feel like I have so far to go. It's kind of like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Yes.
So it really just started like my first couple years of teaching. I taught a variety of different grade levels, K-5 through 4th grade, and college taught me how to write a lesson plan and how to follow a curriculum. And I learned like the basics of, what reading was. But every year, and when I would teach as a classroom teacher, I would pour myself into those reading lessons because I knew that reading was the most important subject.
Absolutely.
If they couldn't read, they couldn't do anything else really. And so, but every year I always had that, like a small group of students that just really struggled with reading. There was a big gap between what they could do and what I was supposed to be teaching them. And there's really kind of two things that really came out to me. And one of them was, what are the pieces of language that work together to help a child learn to read? Like I said, I knew how to follow a curriculum, but I didn't really understand like all of the different pieces and how they work together and how they built on each other in order to help a child become a skilled reader. The second part of that was really the way that the brain processes language. You know, God has created each one of us very uniquely, and each person processes language differently. And for my students that were struggling, there was something that seemed to be blocking that process there. And I might have two kids who struggled with reading that seemed to be struggling with different things. So I knew there was probably different methods that I needed to be using, but I did not know where to begin with that. And that's what actually led me back into going for my master's degree, and I focused on a reading intervention because I was like, I want to know how to help these kids. And while I was in my education program, I was in a practicum where I observed this lady using this program called the Wilson Language Series, which at the time I didn't know what it was, but basically it's an Orton-Gillingham based curriculum. And as I was watching her, I saw how very systematic and explicit her teaching was. She always started with the letter sounds. She built words from them. She used this thing called letter tiles and finger tapping that I'd never seen before. And I saw just like how she progressed to reading. And I saw also that she knew what to do. She had strategies in her tool belt that she knew how to help these kids with their struggles. And so it was really like, as I watched her in action and I saw the impact that it had on kids, and I saw how much sense it made to me in such a short time, that's what kind of led me into getting trained in Wilson. And then I was able to get certified in Orton-Gillingham through actually the school that I'm working at now, Camperdown Academy. And then I've just been growing ever since. I've tied it into my tutoring. I've tied it into even like in the existing reading curriculum that I was using at the school that we taught at. And now I have the opportunity to work at a school that I get to do that all day long. And I love it.
I can tell. Yeah, it's a little obvious. We get that. Okay, so now let's actually talk about Orton-Gillingham. So I'm guessing many of our listeners, they've at least heard that name before. That's probably pretty common, but for many, their knowledge doesn't go much further than that. So what is it? And can you tell us about how it was developed? Just kind of give us some inside information there.
Absolutely. So one of the things I think is a bit of a misconception about Orton-Gillingham is that it's an approach to reading. It's not a curriculum. Just like whole language is an approach to reading. I mean, like there's different approaches to reading. And as you mentioned, it's like under the umbrella of the structured literacy approach, which is very systematic, very explicit, and it teaches all of the research-based components of literacy. So Orton-Gillingham is kind of an approach underneath that umbrella. And basically where it came, like kind of just to give you a little bit of the background about it, it came from Samuel Orton is one of the founders of this program, and Anna Gillingham as well. Samuel Orton worked with, he studied how the brain processed language. Originally, he worked with patients that had a brain injury. And so he learned through his work with these patients how the brain processed language and ways that he could almost create new neural pathways, if you will, by using multiple senses to help these patients recover some of their language. And so he took that knowledge and he started working with children who were struggling with reading but did not have this brain damage. And he found that using these multiple senses simultaneously, and what we now know actually is that through brain scans, the brain does have like these super highways of neurons, right? That are like pathways between the different lobes of our brain. And so what he found is that when he's able to use all of these senses simultaneously, he's actually able to kind of reroute some of those pathways that might be blocked for a child specifically that is struggling with reading. And that's also what we have found with students that have dyslexia, that there's like a traffic jam in those superhighways. And so the goal is you're trying to create new neural highways around that traffic jam in order to get that language processing done. So he's kind of like the science side of this.
Yeah, it sounds like it very much.
And which I really love, right? Because it's not just a matter of, am I observing it and is it happening, and like how, like you can see the brain scans and how it literally does make a difference. And I really love that. So he collaborated with a lady named Orton-Gillingham, who is a psychologist and an educator. And what she did is she took the science of what he had, that research, and she applied it to the structure of the English language. And that is basically how we got the approach of what Orton-Gillingham is.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love No, that's super. That's super. And I love the brain part of it, because like you said, it's not just like, oh, wow, hey, look, I tried this and they all seem to like it and did better. Like there's actual science to this. And I love how they married those together. So we talked a little bit about teaching method or teaching approach. And like you said, it can be applied widely. It's not a curriculum. Okay, So what are those teaching methods though? And maybe as a part B to that, how does that actually look in a classroom?
So first of all, I want to clarify, if you're a classroom teacher and you're listening to this, you're probably going to have to follow a reading curriculum,
Sure.
or especially for younger students, a phonics-based curriculum. You're going to be focusing in on phonics. And so you are tied to the skills of the curriculum and the order that it's covering. And one of the principles of Orton-Gillingham is that it is very diagnostic and prescriptive, specifically to the needs of the students. So there are going to be limitations. However, there are definitely principles that can be used both in small group, in individual tutoring, and in the classroom. And I'm just going to focus in, I think, on 3 of them.
Sure, that's great.
The first one is, because it's built around the structure of our English language, it's a very phonics-based approach. So students learn the patterns of our language in order to be able to read and to write. So I think of it as like a pyramid. So at the top of the pyramid, you have your letters and your sounds, right? And letters and sounds are what we would call phonograms. You teach them how to see it from the reading side of it, and you teach them how to see it and what the sounds are that go with it. And you teach them how to hear the sound and associate the correct letter from the writing side of it. And then you build on that pyramid, and as you're working your way down, then you're going to build words containing the phonograms that you have taught. So you're teaching them to blend those sounds together through the reading. You're teaching them to segment those sounds apart through spelling. As the words are dictated to the student, they hear the whole word. They are having to separate them out into those individual sounds and be able to spell the word. And then as you're working through your way down that pyramid, you're going to build on that by teaching how to put those words into sentences. And then you're going to go to the connected text there. And also another part of that is, like, one of the things that I'm doing right now with some of my 3rd graders that I'm really enjoying is, they already know these 1-syllable words, but now we're going to build on these words and teach them what is a word with a prefix and a suffix. So if I have the word teach, right? They know that T is one phonogram, EA is another phonogram, and CH is another phonogram. So even though that there are 5 letters, there are only 3 sounds, and they learn how to associate that together. But once they can read that word teach, now I'm going to add a prefix to it. Re. What does re mean? It means to do again, right? So reteach. Now I'm going to add a suffix to it. Ing, reteaching. And then I'm going to also teach them how to divide up multi-syllable words, like the word fantastic. Where do you divide that word up? How do you sound out each one of those syllables? So like I said, it's very structured in its approach.
Yeah, you can tell it's very systematic.
Absolutely. But it's really exciting to see these kids come across these big words, and they've got these tools in order to be able to sound that out.
Oh yeah, they have hooks to hang on. Like it's very clear in what you're saying. Like it's giving them exactly what they need to apply to different situations. I love that.
And I also really like too, along with that, is that you are teaching them to become independent learners.
Yes.
Right? So they can take that and apply it to a brand new word that they have never seen, but because they've got the tools, they know how to sound it out. And so the goal is that you are going to teach them automaticity of words by teaching them automaticity of sound, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
The faster and quicker and easier that a child can decode the language or decode the page in front of them of words, the more brain power they have left in order to be able to comprehend. Because for my poor kiddos that I work with every day, they are struggling so much to go, okay, what is this code in front of me? Like, how do I decode it? And so I'm trying to give them strategies to help them with that. So that's one. The second one is, as I mentioned before, is that it is simultaneous multisensory. So it's not, when I say multisensory, I'm talking about the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic tactile. So a way that we would do this would be, if I'm going to work with first graders, it's like one of my favorite grades to work with because you just see them explode with their reading. I just love that grade. And so what I'm going to do is, let's say if I start at the top of that pyramid where I'm starting with those phonograms and I'm introducing the phonograms to them, I'm going to show them a phonogram card. Let's say it's SH. And they're going to look at those letters. So they're seeing it. They're going to, what I would have them do is to take their two fingers and on some type of like a tactile surface, whether it's like a screen from Hobby Lobby, this little like knitting screens that you can put there, or sand tray or whatever it is. And I'm going to have them finger trace those letters on the table. So now they're getting that kinesthetic motor memory to help them with that association. So then they're also going to give me the sound. So again, I will present the SH to them. They're going to finger trace SH and they're going to say, shh. And maybe even for my little ones, I might even add a keyword and say, let's say those letters at the same time that we're tracing them. SH, I might give them a keyword shoe, right? Shoe and shh, because we're helping them to make those connections. Another way that I think is one of the things that I got to do was we worked on finger tapping. And finger tapping helps the child be able to, again, make a direct association between those letters and their sounds. So if I'm going to dictate a word, let's say I dictate the word shop, I teach the kids how to finger tap out the sounds in that word. So when a child finger taps, I always have them finger tap from left to right because that is the direction that we're going to be reading. So we want to keep everything consistent. So if you're finger tapping with your left hand, you're going to start with your pinky and you're just going to tap those sounds right on the table. Or, you can do it up in the air, however you want to do it. I like to do it on the table because, again, it just gives really more of that tactile feel. And so they're going to tap out the sounds. Sh, shop, and then we wrap it up, right? And so that's another way that you can add in that multisensory component. And then along with that, what I might have them do is we call this SOS procedure, where I would dictate a word to them like shop. They're going to repeat it. They're going to tap out those sounds. Sh, and then in order to really solidify that direct correlation between the sounds and the letters, I'm going to have them go back and tap that again, but now say the letters that are associated with those sounds. So that first tap is going to say SH. The next one's going to say O. Then the third one's going to be P. And then carrying it down that line, they're going to spell it. and they're going to say those letters at the same time that they're writing it. S-H-O-P. Now, every child's going to be different in what they need, but sometimes we would do this even as a whole class when we're introducing new phonograms with new words. We're going to teach them that procedure, and it might feel like it's overkill, but man, for some of those kiddos, that is exactly what they need.
I'm sure that repetition, I'm sure too, just very predictable over and over.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think really the key piece in there, and it's a piece that a lot of times can be easy to just drop off, but the key piece really is that kinesthetic tactile. It's that muscle memory, because a lot of these kids, they don't have that muscle memory, and they don't know where to start with these letters and even how to form them. So that's just another key piece. So like I said, it's language-based. It is simultaneously multisensory. And the third one that I kind of wanted to focus in on today is that it is direct and explicit. And that kind of goes along, obviously, with the structured literacy approach. And that is basically that the learning outcomes are very clearly defined, taught, and assessed. One of my coworkers and mentors, I absolutely love her, Terry Ann Hawks, and I know she's been on this show.
Yes.
And
great episode.
Yeah, she's been just such a blessing to me. One of the things that she always says is the one doing the talking is the one doing the learning.
Absolutely.
And so I was like, I really, really love that. And I think we all struggle with like talking too much as teachers. But so along with that little saying, we have another little saying for Orton-Gillingham practitioners. We say, I do, we do, you do. And what a lot of us teachers do is we say, I tell, you do. And we skip that middle part. But to be really direct and explicit, you have to walk that child down that path.
Right.
And if you just say, I tell, you do, those kids need the step by step. And so if I'm going to teach a child, let's say, how to finger tap out the sounds in a word, I'm going to show them how to do it. We're going to do it together, and then they're going to do it. So I really like how she says that, because it's just a reminder to me. Another thing is just limiting your talking, limiting your language, but still be direct and explicit through your modeling and through working that together with them. So I think those are really kind of like the big picture ideas of what Orton-Gillingham is. Again, you're starting at the top, you're working your way down. With each step, you're bringing in those different multisensory components, and you're very clear with the student. There's no guesswork involved about what you're going to be teaching them and what the expectations are.
Yeah, those are excellent. And in all honesty, those are really good practices for all students, strugglers or not. Like, if you think of just listening to you talk, like, we need to be doing that with our students anyway. You know, this isn't just if they're struggling, just that really clear instruction. I love the phonics space, that multi-sensory. We get going as teachers. Like you said, we say a lot of words. Like, we get go, and I'm going to give you these instructions and you're going to do it because we've got to get through this. But right. I love just listening to this. It's just the slowing it down, very intentional. I like that multi-sensory approach too for all students. So here on the podcast, we're all for practical, and already what you've given us is super practical, but we want our listeners to walk away with practical ideas they could take right into their classroom. So Christina, talk with us about how you might tie these principles into a reading lesson for younger students. You've kind of hinted at a few things, but how would you tie these in a lesson?
Sure. Maybe I could go back to my first grade example, and sure. I know everybody's going to be, you know, they're coming at it from a different perspective with different curricula. But one of the things that I did as a teacher, and I know some of our teachers did at the school that we were at, is we looked at the scope and sequence. What are the phonograms that are going to be taught, let's say, next week? And if you have a phonics scope and sequence, or if you've got phonics skills covered in there, then I can look and go, okay, let's see, next week I'm going to be teaching SH, I'm going to be teaching maybe my digraphs, SH, TH, CH, and CK. Let's say I'm covering those new phonograms. So what I would do is I'm going to pull out some little flashcards with those letters on them. And I'm going to do my phonogram drill with my students. Now, that's not maybe just my only 4 phonograms. I might have some review phonograms that we have built up. That's how we spiral in that review. So, or there might be some phonograms that I notice my kiddos are struggling with. And so I'm always going to have my short vowel sounds in there. I'm going to add my new phonograms and anything else that we still need to review. Now I've got my phonogram card deck. And so I'm going to take it from the reading side and the spelling side. So again, from the reading side, I'm just going to do a quick phonogram drill where I show the flashcard to the students. They're finger tracing the sounds on that textured mat, and they're giving it to me. And then on the spelling side of it, I'm going to dictate those sounds to the students. They're going to repeat it as we're going through that multisensory step-by-step process, and then they're going to write it, and they're going to say the letter names as they write it. We're going to work our way down. I might choose, as a classroom teacher, I might choose, like, say, 6 or 7 words, maybe 10, who knows, that contain those specific phonograms. And we're going to practice blending words together or blending those sounds together to form those words. And we're going to practice. So what I might do there is I might have some letter tiles. And I might put some letter tiles. So if I'm doing like my digraphs, I might do SH. Let's do my shop example or ship example. Shop. I might do SH, O, and then P. So I've got my 3-letter tiles, even though I've got 4 words. SH is one tile, O is another, and P is another. And then I have the students practice touching each one of those tiles as they're sounding out the words. So I might have them just practice doing something like that, or even just writing the words. And then I'm going to take that on the other side of that, and I'm going to dictate, let's say, 5 words containing those phonograms. And I'm going to make sure that my kiddos learn how to finger tap those sounds out. So sometimes with a classroom teacher, that's about as far as you can get, because then you've got, again, you have to stick with what the curriculum says, and you can only go so slow, because you want them to be ready for the next grade level. But a lot of times that was really what my kids needed. And then sometimes I would even write out sentences that contained those words and have them practice reading those sentences and have them practice reading, or I might dictate 2 sentences to them that contain those words, because I'm also teaching them, how do you capitalize that first, or what do you have to do? Capitalize that first letter. Make sure you put a period at the end. What's your subject in there? What's your verb? So you're tying in all those elements of language there. So that's probably about as much as you might have time to do as a lower elementary teacher.
No, that's great. That's super. And those strategies are very doable. They're just a great support to any student, as they're learning. Those are strategies that they can easily carry with and keep doing. Okay. So no doubt you have piqued the interest of some of our listeners. There are some who are going to want more information about recommended reading, even where to go to get further training in this. So what recommendations, what could you give them to take with them?
Great question. And I actually went back to some of my coworkers and even gathered some of their recommendations.
Oh, wow.
I just work with such an amazing group of people that they just live and breathe this stuff. And I've learned so much from them. And I mean, the first place I would go is or the Orton-Gillingham Academy website, OGA. And so there you can find a bunch of just, learning more about what Orton-Gillingham is about. So I would also go to the IDA website, the International Dyslexia Association website. Again, a bunch of fact sheets on there, a bunch of infographics on there that kind of help you to visualize more of what dyslexia is and how Orton-Gillingham can help you. As far as books, there's one called The Reading Mind by Daniel Willingham. And there's another one called Language at the Speed of Sight by Mark Seidenberg. Those are some really good books if you're interested in that. And then I even got a couple podcast recommendations, which I was like, I love that.
Yes.
So there's Melissa and Lori Love Literacy. Melissa and Lori Love Literacy. If you're just kind of trying to learn more about what is this all about, okay, I just want to learn more about this. That's a great one to listen to. There's another one, if you're really into the science of reading, called The Science of Reading, the podcast. And in season 2 of that, actually, that's where they really dive into what are all those pieces of language and how do they work together to help a child read, which I really love. And then another one might be a novel idea, the history and science of reading. That's another one of the podcasts that is very highly recommended. And then finally, I do have my own website called The Multisensory Classroom.
Good. I was hoping you were going to tell us about that.
where I do create a bunch of resources for teachers that can go right along with their curriculum. We're also starting to put content out there as well. Hopefully I've given you at least just some starting points in different directions of where you could go. And I'm always, if you want to reach out, I'm always happy to help in any way I can.
Yeah, no, these are great. And we'll go ahead and make sure to put these in the show notes too, so that those who've been listening and trying to jot this down as fast as they can go to the show notes and see that. And I will say, Orton-Gillingham is such a valuable tool. And I can say I don't get any compensation for this, but I've seen this work with BJU Press materials as well. It's incredibly successful. So I want to just really encourage our listeners, go check this out. Check out Christina's work as well. I appreciate Christina's work in her own training and preparation, but also what she does in preparing materials for others to use in their classrooms and support students. So we're going to put her website on there too, so go check that out. Christina, this has been fantastic. You've brought us a lot to think about, a lot of great resources, and I think just seeing there are different ways to do things. There's some really doable strategies that can help those students. So thank you for taking your time to be with us today. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Listeners, thank you also for joining us today. I hope you were challenged and inspired as I was. Remember to go to teachereditionpodcast.com to submit questions and your stories for upcoming episodes, as well as to read more about this podcast and Christina's work. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media. Now, once again, it's time to get back to your day. But it's not just any day. Every day in the classroom is your day to impact and inspire through God's power and through His grace working in you. Go do what God has called you to do.